People keep saying Gen Z doesn't want to work. They don't want to go to the office. They don't want to work 9 to 5. They want 4-day work weeks. They job hop. They care about work life balance more than previous generations. And maybe they're lazy. Or maybe they're asking a question that previous generations stopped asking. Why are we still structuring our lives around a work week that was designed almost a century ago? Because think about how much the world has changed since the 40-hour work week became the norm. Computers, the internet, automation, AI, entire categories of jobs have disappeared or been radically transformed. A task that once took an entire afternoon can now take minutes. So here's the strange part. We have become dramatically more productive, but we haven't become proportionally more free. In many cases, we're working just as much and expecting even more from ourselves. So where did all that productivity go? The 40-hour workweek didn't emerge because someone scientifically calculated that human beings should work exactly 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It emerged from the industrial economy. Henry Ford introduced the 5-day, 40-hour work week in 1926 after decades in which workers could be putting in far longer days. The argument was partly economic. Rested workers could actually be more productive. And eventually, the 40-hour standard became embedded into American labor law through the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. And the world followed after that. But here's what's fascinating. The economy of 2026 looks nothing like the economy of 1938. Most of us aren't working on factory assembly lines. A huge percentage of modern work is information, communication, and problem solving. And yet, we've largely kept the same basic structure. Show up, work for 8 hours, go home, repeat. This creates a fascinating paradox. Technology is supposed to make work easier and more productive, and it does, but we haven't necessarily used those productivity gains to reduce the amount of time we work. We've often used them to produce more. A faster computer doesn't mean you finish work at noon, it means you get more work done by 5 pm. Email didn't eliminate communication, it made communication instantaneous and then gave us more of it. The smartphone didn't create more free time, it made you reachable everywhere. And now AI is entering the equation. We're creating tools that can write, code, analyze, summarize, and automate tasks that previously required human labor. So what happens? Do we work less? Or do we simply increase the amount of output we expect from every worker? That's the question sitting underneath the entire debate about AI and the future of work. There's another problem. The old 40-hour work week was built around a household model that increasingly doesn't exist. Historically, a typical household could have one primary breadwinner and one person handling much of the unpaid labor at home. Today, two adults in many households both work. There is a lot of research that puts the combined paid labor of married American couples at around 83 hours per week. And they're not necessarily getting dramatically more financial freedom from those additional hours. Housing, childcare, healthcare, education, the cost of maintaining a middle class life has risen so much that two incomes can end up feeling less like a luxury and more like a requirement. So we've created a strange situation. Two people work full time so that the household can afford the lifestyle that increasingly requires two people to work full time. That's the trap. And this isn't even the first time people have imagined that technology would liberate us from work. In 1930, economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that technological progress could eventually allow people to work roughly 15 hours a week. Obviously, that didn't happen. And the interesting question isn't just why Keynes was wrong, it's why he was wrong. The problem wasn't that technology stopped improving, technology improved enormously. The problem was that our desires changed along with our productivity. When people became richer, they didn't necessarily say, great, I'll take the extra productivity as leisure. They often said, I want a bigger house. I want better healthcare. I want to travel. I want nicer things. I want my children to have better opportunities. And so the economy kept producing more because we kept wanting more. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. Higher living standards are real progress, but it means productivity doesn't automatically translate into leisure. Someone has to choose leisure. And modern economies are very good at giving us reasons not to. Think about what happens when you have more free time. You might read, exercise, play an instrument, spend time with your children, build something, join a community, or you might consume Netflix, TikTok, shopping, restaurants, gaming, endless scrolling. The modern economic system has an obvious incentive here. Businesses produce things, advertising creates demand, people consume. And to consume, people need money, so they work. The more they work, the more they can consume, and the cycle continues. The problem is that we can become so accustomed to the system that we start confusing being busy with being productive and productivity with meaning. That's where work culture becomes interesting. Because if your job is not only how you earn money, but also your identity, your status, and your answer to the question, what do you do? Then reducing work suddenly becomes psychologically complicated. What exactly are you supposed to do with all that free time? And there's another contradiction. A lot of modern knowledge work isn't even 8 hours of concentrated productivity. Microsoft's 2024 Work Trend Index found that knowledge workers spent about 60% of their time communicating, while 68% said they didn't have enough uninterrupted time to actually focus on meaningful work. Think about that. We're sitting in front of computers that can perform extraordinary amounts of computation, and a huge amount of our working day is spent in meetings, emails, messages, and coordination, not necessarily creating, not necessarily solving, just communicating about work, which raises a pretty uncomfortable possibility. Maybe that problem isn't that humans can't be productive for 8 hours. Maybe we've constructed jobs that require people to be available for 8 hours whether they're productive or not. There's actually evidence that this can work. 4-day and shorter workweek experiments in places including Iceland and Japan have found that reducing hours can maintain or even improve productivity in some settings. The mechanism is pretty intuitive. When you have less time, you remove unnecessary meetings, cut pointless work, prioritize, focus, and then you go home. The goal isn't necessarily to make people work harder for 4 days, it's to stop pretending that sitting at work for 8 hours automatically creates 8 hours of value. Flexible schedules can also allow people to work around the hours when they're actually at their best. And that matters because human beings aren't machines. Our attention fluctuates, our energy fluctuates, our lives certainly fluctuate. And this brings us back to Gen Z. Maybe they're not uniquely unwilling to work, maybe they're simply entering adulthood at a moment where the bargain between work and life looks increasingly questionable. They've grown up watching technology eliminate tasks, automate work, and make communication instantaneous. And yet, they're also watching housing becoming more expensive, careers becoming less secure, and the cost of maintaining a normal middle class life rise. So when someone tells them, work hard and you'll eventually have a good life, they may reasonably ask, what exactly is the good life I'm working towards? That's a very different question from, do I want to work? And I don't think the answer is that everyone should work 15 hours a week. That's unrealistic for many jobs. And shorter hours don't automatically solve every economic problem. But I do think we should question something we've taken for granted. Why should technological progress increase the amount of output society demands from each person forever? At some point, productivity gains have to become something other than more production. They can become higher wages, better public services, more investment, or something we almost never talk about as an economic outcome. Time. Time with your family, time to build something that doesn't make money, time to participate in your community, time to simply exist without feeling guilty about it. Philosopher Joseph Piper argued that leisure isn't the opposite of a meaningful life. It's one of the conditions that makes a meaningful life possible. And maybe that's the thing we've forgotten. For a century, we've become incredibly good at optimizing work. Maybe the next stage of technological progress should be about optimizing what work is actually for. Because the ultimate promise of technology was never supposed to be that humans could produce more emails per hour, it was supposed to be that we could live better. And perhaps the real question isn't whether Gen Z wants to work, it's whether in a world this productive, we've forgotten how to live when we're not working. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. If you found this video engaging, it would really help us out if you subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.